Hi everyone, it's Lynn Dion here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today I'm really excited to show you this kind of dramatic, bold ornament card we're going to be creating. We're going to be coloring on some black cardstock with our Prismacolor pencils. And we're going to be using some Hero Arts products today as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So to create our ornament for the card, we're using the Hero Arts Bulb Ornament Infinity Die set. We're going to grab that largest one from this set, and I'm going to die cut that from some black 100-pound cardstock. And we'll do some stamping on our ornament using the Hero Arts Holly Berries Clear Stamp Set. I'm going to be using that beautiful big cluster of holly and berry leaves. So I'm going to place the ornament in my MISTI stamp positioner. I'm centering it there just so I have plenty of room for this large size stamp. I've got my Pink and Main anti-static powder. I'm going to put a little bit of that down first because we are going to be doing some embossing and I don't want any static on the paper. So once I've positioned that stamp, I'm using my Versamark watermark ink pad to do my stamping. And when I'm using an embossing ink pad, I like to ink it up lightly a couple of times and do my stamping because that is a very thick ink and I don't want to get too much on at one time. So I like to do a couple of stampings. I'm going to wipe that clean and then reposition that and fill in the rest of this ornament. And I should have probably moved my ornament off to the right there just a little bit more. It was kind of close on that opposite side for my stamp, but it worked out just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and do that again, that same thing where I'm going to ink this up a couple of times and stamp this. So now that that entire ornament is filled in, let's go ahead and do our embossing. I've got my Ranger Liquid Platinum Embossing Powder. I'm going to sprinkle that on all over and tap away the excess. Now if you did get any powder where you didn't want it, just use a dry brush and just brush away any excess before you do your heating. Now when this embossing powder is melted, it does look like liquid platinum. It's absolutely gorgeous. I know I've used this in some other videos, but it's one of my favorites. And I'm going to make sure my heat tool is nice and hot, and then I'll take it to my image and do my embossing. So you can really see how gorgeous that embossing is. So let's set that aside. I'm going to grab my Prismacolor colored pencils. I have this set of 48 and I'm going to grab a few of these. The chartreuse, olive, cream, orange, rose, magenta, and white. And those are listed in the upper left-hand corner there. And I'll also list them down below for you as well. So I'm starting off with this lighter green. And you do want to make sure you keep your pencil nice and sharp. I'm coloring on the black cardstock. And I'm going to just color directly onto it. I'm not going to layer down any color first. You could lay down some white first here if you wanted to, but I decided just to go for it and start to do my coloring. So you do want to be careful when you're coloring with the embossing. You don't want to scrape off any of your embossing. So you want to make sure you are going in between the lines there to do your coloring. And I'm just adding that darker shadow with that darker green, and then I'll come back in with that lighter color and do a little bit where I'll blend those two colors together. I like to use a soft brush just to sweep away any excess pencil that you might get there. I'm using my Nuvo surface sweep brush because it's a super soft brush and it will just gently remove any excess. So here again, I'll do that same process. And I'm adding that darker shadowing just sort of towards the center of the leaves. And then I'll come in with that lighter pencil and blend that out. And you can keep going over the top of this as much as or as little as you like. So you do, again, want to keep that pencil sharpener nice and handy so that you can sharpen up your pencils as you go along. That will make it nice and easy to get into some of these smaller areas. Now on that fern, I'm just adding a little bit of green in between those areas of that little greenery sprig. And then on these smaller leaves, I'm going to do the same thing, putting that darker color sort of at the base of the leaf. And you can see there, I keep using that surface sweep brush to clean off the area. Now on this one, I laid down some white for these little berries. And then I came in with that cream color. I didn't think there was quite enough contrast there. So now I'm coming in with the orange and adding a little bit of color down at the base. And then I'll keep blending this out with those other two colors, the white and the cream. So now I've got a lighter pink and a darker pink, and I'm going to go ahead and do these little berries. Just adding a little bit of shadowing there on the berries with that darker color. So coloring on this black cardstock is really simple. Again, you could lay down some white first if you wanted to, but I really like how this looks. Now there you can see that I did bump into some of that embossing, and I decided to heat set it really quickly, because if you heat set it, it will remelt that embossing powder and attach it right back to your card. So you can see the coloring on this goes pretty quickly. I'm not doing a lot of fussing, just blending with some shadowing there in the centers of these leaves. So there wasn't a real lot of coloring here. This went very quickly. So now I did die cut 3 more of the large ornaments. I'm going to stack these up behind this one just to give it a little bit more substance. So I'm using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to glue these together. So the next thing we want to do is create a little topper for our ornament. So I went ahead and die cut that largest ornament again, and I'm using the Hero Arts glitter cardstock. And that package comes with black and white glitter paper. So I'm just cutting that little topper off and gluing that right on the top of our ornament. Now I certainly didn't need to die cut that entire piece, but I just wanted to show you there what I was doing, where this little topper came from. And I think that little sparkly topper just adds a lot to this black ornament. So let's set that aside to dry. Now I'm going to grab some Hero Arts paper. This is the Hero Hues Premium Cardstock in Kiwi. I've cut this to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to be embossing it using the Tim Holtz 3D Texture Fades embossing folder, and this is called Pine Branches. So let's place the cardstock in our embossing folder. I'll be running it through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine. You can see there I've got a piece of cardboard. So I've got my platform, then my embossing folder, and this piece of cardboard. I'm using that to apply a little bit of pressure to this embossing folder. Sometimes I use a couple of pieces of cardboard. You don't want it to be too tight as you're running it through your machine. And I'm going to run it through a couple of times. You could also stack up some cardstock here if you prefer. Just make sure that it's not too tight as you're running it through. And you could certainly use the directions for your specific machine. So now we have this embossed. Let's go ahead and start inking this up. And I'm using the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide in Rustic Wilderness. And I've also got my Hero Arts blending brush. And I'll be applying ink on those branches and then pulling it in towards the center till it gets nice and light. So I'm going to keep that kiwi colored cardstock everywhere else on the card. Again, I'm just kind of blending it mostly on the branches and then letting it go a little bit lighter as we get into towards the middle of the cardstock. So now I've got some white gesso, And I'm going to place a little bit of that on my glass media mat. I'll spritz that with a little bit of water from my distress sprayer, and then I'll go ahead and spatter that. Now I do want a lot of this snowy texture, so I'm placing it onto an acrylic block, and I'll just flick it from that block onto my cardstock. That way I'll get a lot of this spattering. I wanted it to look very snowy in the background. So I'm just going to continue to spatter that down onto this paper, and you can see how pretty that is. So now I've got my Wink of Stella glitter pen. I'm going to just squeeze some of that glitter down onto my glass media mat. I'll again spritz that with a little bit of water, and then I'll flick that off of this acrylic block as well. And this will give me teeny tiny little spatterings of glitter. And I hope you can see that there. So now I'm going to cut this panel down a little bit. So we started off with it being 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to cut this down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. We're going to be placing it onto some black cardstock so that we have a nice black frame around the edges. That'll just tie that ornament into the card a little bit better. So the black cardstock will be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'll go ahead and glue these two panels together. And I'm just centering that. Now I've got that Wink of Stella glitter pen, and I'm going to add a little bit of glitter to all of these little berries. Now to create a little bow for the top of our ornament, I'm using the Hero Arts Gift Peekaboo Infinity Parts stamp set. And this is just so full of these beautiful gift packages. I just really want the bow from one of these, so I picked the bow that I thought was the best size and shape for this project. But what I'm going to do is take some black cardstock. I'll go ahead and stamp this image right down onto the black cardstock. Again, using that watermark ink pad so that we can go ahead and emboss this bow. Don't worry about that left-hand corner of the package. We're not going to be using that anyway. We're just going to cut the bow from this. And what I want to do after I heat set this is we're going to just cut the top part of the bow, that strand at the top, and the bow itself, so that our ornament will look like it's hanging from the top of our card. So I'm using my detail scissors to cut this out. Now I do want to cut right up to that embossed line. Again here, if you did accidentally cut into that embossing, don't worry about that. You can go ahead and quickly heat set that, and it'll melt it right back down onto your cardstock. So don't worry, but do try to be careful as you're going around. So again, I'm just going to cut that top strand of the bow and the bow itself. I'll go ahead and just heat set that quickly again, just melting that right back down onto the cardstock just in case I accidentally cut into any of that embossing. I'll just seal it right back down onto the paper. Now I'll go back to those two pink colored pencils and color this in. I'm going to add a little bit of shading right in the center of the bow and then underneath here where the bow loops around. And then I'll do the same thing down here at the bottom. So I colored in both sides the exact same way. And now I've got that Wink of Stella glitter pen, and I'll go ahead and add some glitter to this bow. And we can set that aside to dry. Let's create the card base. We're going back to that Kiwi cardstock from Hero Arts. This is a 100-pound weight cardstock, so it's perfect for our card base. And the panel that I cut measures 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and we're scoring it at 5 1/2 inches. That will give us a standard A2 size top folding card. So we can start assembling our card. Let's go ahead and glue this panel right to the front. So that'll be the exact same size as our card base. And then for the ornament, I'm going to just glue that flat onto the card, but we will pop up that little bow. Remember, this ornament, we've got 4 layers to this because we stacked up 3 behind it, so it's nice and thick. And so in order for the bow to sit nicely there, I'm going to place a little bit of 3D foam tape on there. And just a quick mention that all the products I'm using today are listed down below and also on my blog. So just a couple of strips of that, and then I'll also place a little bit of glue there where it's going to sit right at the top of the ornament. And I'll line this up with the very top of the card. So for a little bit more interest, I'm going to add a little embellishment. This is from the Buttons Galore and More Sparkletz. I just grabbed one of these little pearls. It's kind of that pinky color that we have in the bow. So I'm going to just use my Marvy jewel picker and I'll just pop that right into place. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the finished card. And I hope you decide to give this a try, coloring with your Prismacolor pencils onto some dark cardstock. Keep in mind you could use black or navy blue, would be really pretty. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Happy holidays. Take care. Bye-bye.